everyone. Thank you for all taking the time to join us today. This is our 6th episode, and this week we're joined by various people within the student body to discuss mental health in sport, particularly at the university. I'll take a moment now to warn people that we'll be engaging discussions about many aspects of mental health, possibly including depression, anxiety, suicide, eating disorders, and so on. So if that's something that you're not comfortable with, you have the opportunity to click away now. So these are difficult conversations, but I think that everyone here today will agree that they're necessary, and that honest discussion is important to improve our mental health provisions at the university. And to start with, shall we all go around, and if you could introduce yourself and any role you have, along with the reason why you're personally interested in this conversation.
So I'm Josh Dhillon. I'm captain of the ones at EURL, so rugby league, and I'm also one of the student ambassadors for Movember at the university. So as part of that team of 4 that organised Movember last year and this year. And obviously, like through kind of that work, you get to have lots of conversations with people, and you're kind of enveloped in how important it is as an issue. And just for me personally, I've suffered from mental health problems for as long as I can kind of remember, since I was like 14, 15. Having played a lot of sport and stuff as well, so I'm very obviously aware of how that kind of environment, especially in like male sport, can kind of manifest itself, because I've been through that. So it's something I feel very strongly about.
I can go next. I'm Henry. I write for the sports section of Exeposé, and I think I have a personal kind of interest in mental health. As someone as well who suffers from mental health issues, I'm very passionate about making changing about stigma around the kind of mental health and talking about it. So I'm very happy to be talking about it today.
I'll go next. My name is Sabrina Cass. I am the Athletic Union Welfare Officer, and I wanted to take this role and also do anything kind of welfare related because I used to have an eating disorder, and I'm kind of in the recovery process of that, as well as things like anxiety. And I do believe that sport has played a massive part in helping me to recover from binge eating disorder. It was something that gave me consistency and routine, and just massively has helped me. And that's why I want to kind of give back and talk about how important sport and mental health align, but how they can affect one another as well.
Harry, I don't know if you want to chime in on anything personally.
So I'll chime in a bit as well. So obviously those watching will know Elise and I have been doing these for the last few episodes, and I'm an online sports editor, but myself, I've gone through sort of mental health issues in the past couple of years. Those who know me personally know what the effect of those were, and coming out the other side. And yeah, just with sport, it's such an important, or with everything, like for me, whilst I was going through those, that opportunity to actually get out and do a bit of coaching, play a bit of sport was the thing that sort of kept me going throughout that period. So that's why for me, it's such an important topic to be able to talk about frankly and honestly.
And I think I'm pretty similar to the majority of you. I'm also an online editor for Exeposé. I'd say that my relationship with sport was a key point at university for helping my mental health. I know a lot of people struggle when they get into sport with external pressures and that sort of thing, but I think definitely as a female, it gave me a better relationship with my body, especially. I think that when you grow up, you kind of think that you should look a certain way, and then I came to university and started playing rugby and realised that the only way I want to look is the way that I feel best. I think that sport definitely encourages that, especially among my experience with the club, and having such a supportive group of women. So yeah, I'm really passionate about the benefits of sport for all people. So to start off with, I wondered if we could think about, if anyone has anything to volunteer about the causes of poor mental health rates among athletes in sport, because we can see that like depression and anxiety from the statistics that I read out are at a higher rate among athletes.
I think with athletes in general, with kind of people who do sports, the idea is that you're at your peak and kind of some kind of part of your physical makeup. So that can easily stem already with kind of body image issues and unhealthy relationships with food and exercise. And I feel the higher up in the kind of hierarchy of sport you go, the more unhealthy potentially that relationship could come with, it becomes a means to an end almost. And I feel, especially with people who want to focus on their body, it becomes a very tightly controlled, almost a job in kind of keeping yourself fit. And that can easily kind of start eating disorders, depression, anxiety, these kind of constant thoughts about wanting to keep yourself in shape, wanting to keep yourself eating the right amount, exercising the most, keeping yourself at the peak. So it is for things which I think just the environment in itself is very stressful as an athlete. And especially as, of course, the higher you go, the more stressful that becomes and the more pressure that puts on yourself to kind of upkeep your body. And as I said, it's a very easy way to kind of stem those problems which start with eating disorders and depression and anxiety.
I think a lot of it as well, I'll use Johnny Wilkinson as a prime example. Obviously, that's not body image, it's the mental thing, is that for some athletes at that top level, that drive, that determination, that desire to be the very best, to get to the pinnacle, does eventually take its toll. And for those that are watching, if you listen to what he's been doing in the last couple of years since he's retired, speaking out, it's deep stuff and it's really difficult stuff to listen to, but you start to understand some of it is to do with personality traits as well. And if you're so driven and so attentive to wanting to achieve your goal because you're in that elite environment, you sometimes forget the other things that are going on around you that you need to be able to do for your own mental well-being in pursuit of like that perceived perfection. I think if you look at it like that.
I think also at university as well, it can be kind of like, sport can be kind of like a microcosm of university society in general, and it can be an environment that for so many people is so much fun and so kind of uplifting for them. But I think it's an environment as well where if you are kind of having a bit of a rougher time, it's a hard place to be, because it is the best kind of bit of so many people's lives, and it is an environment where everyone seems to be having like a really, really great time, and it's hard to kind of to reckon with that when you're not. And I think it can be a difficult environment for that, and it can be such a great kind of release and a method of helping, but it also can be a tough environment, I think, when you kind of are around people who are, joking around all the time and it seems like they're having the best time of their lives, and obviously lots of them won't be, but it can feel like that, I think, sometimes, especially at universities.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's this massive kind of like almost a FOMO thing where if you're in a team sport and everyone around you is having an absolutely great time and you're just really suffering, you almost try to push yourself into that medium where you feel the same as other people around you. But I think similarly, when you do like a sport where you're not like in a team, like for example, you have things like off the top of my head, like boxing, it can feel quite isolating when you are on your own and you feel like you don't have that, you have all the support that you need physically, and sometimes there isn't all the support you need mentally. You have all the training, all the physical stuff, but it lacks in kind of the talking and the mental side of things.
I think sometimes it comes down as well to feeling like a little bit of a burden, where especially if you're a professional athlete, even an athlete at university, if you're getting all these things given to you and you're doing so well, that kind of burden to, well, my life is so great and I'm experiencing something that not a lot of people get to experience, so do I have the right to be upset or feel bad when I'm experiencing something that is so rare and so special? So why do you think it is that professional athletes in particular don't really speak out about it when it's happening? Because Harry, you mentioned that Johnny Wilkinson is starting to talk about it now, but why does it take so many years to even into retirement to then look back on it and then speak out?
So if I can just chip into that, I think what you said is so true. Like, you put yourself in this position of privilege where it's like, oh, I've got everything I could have, I have everything I could possibly ever like dream of, if it's something you've wanted for so long as well. That I think the fear of speaking out comes from, you sound like you're being ungrateful for what you've got, and you sound like a million and one other people could have had this opportunity and I'm the one who's got it and I'm not happy. And it's like the fear of speaking out comes from maybe losing what you have, in the physical aspect or the sporting aspect. You feel like you're going to lose it if you're almost honest, because I think people just like perceive what they want to perceive in a sport or, you know, in a physical respect, but then they don't see what goes on behind closed doors. And I think that's the difficulty, is if they don't see it and someone's too scared to speak out because they don't want to feel like they're being like a burden, like you said, or something like that. That's the difficulty, is you don't want to lose what you have. And that's possibly why Johnny Wilkinson has only just started speaking out. You know, he's had his like prime, his peak, or whatever you want to like call it, essentially.
And there's so many others as well. See, like Sabrina, you sort of touched on boxing a couple of minutes ago. I think he might not be everyone's cup of tea, and obviously he said some things in the past which obviously were rightly condemned. But you look at someone like Tyson Fury and the journey he's been on, and you look at, to be fair, I thought BT Sport, when obviously they were starting to do the stuff for the Wilder fights, were brilliant, not because they were focusing on him as an athlete, but because they were focusing on him as a person, and about how actually the sport was what was driving him back. And when he was training and he was speaking, he said obviously the long-term goal was he wanted to get his world titles back, but it was more about just being able to feel true to himself. And again, that's what it comes down to. And for someone like him, like, he's a prime example. He reached that pinnacle for himself, and everything went spiraling downhill so quickly. And it really does hammer home that point of not feeling like you're able to speak out because you're at the top of your game, and because you feel like you're going to be a burden on other people. But actually, with someone like him and what he ended up saying about mental health when he was on Sports Personality, and what he said in the aftermath of that first fight against Wilder, it was so important, because he sat there and said, look, like, he is a huge 6'6", 6'7" bloke that punches people for a living, but he's learned that he needs to sit there and talk to people if it's not okay, and express himself. And actually, especially for men's mental health as well, because that's one of the big issues, is men feeling they're not able to speak out when they're struggling for whatever societal reasons. Having someone like that be able to say that and actively engage in those discussions is so important going forwards as well.
I was just gonna say, I think also, like, in elite sport, the reason kind of I think you don't get as many people speaking out is because it is like, it's still wrongly seen as like, or can be seen as a sign of weakness. And in elite sport, the kind of the fans and crowds can be so toxic to people, and can make you feel, can kind of, like, you know, opposition fans and stuff are there, like, do kind of verbally capitalize on your weaknesses and stuff. You see it with racial abuse, you see it with kind of homophobic abuse, and you see it all the time. That's kind of, that is the culture around, like, you know, opposition sports fans. And so, you know, I can imagine it would be really, really scary for players to have to come out about kind of mental health problems. And you saw it in the basketball this summer in the NBA. There was a player, Paul George, that was playing pretty badly, came out kind of a week after him saying he was struggling mentally. And you just look on Instagram, people are, you know, saying, oh, it's just an excuse. You're just like, you know, and just the kind of stuff you see when people are open about it. People are, oh, you know, they're just using it as an excuse. They're playing badly. They're just being soft. They're just whatever. And it's, sports fans can be so toxic. So I can imagine it as an elite sports, and it must be such a kind of barrier, an extra barrier to kind of rid yourself of that stigma.
I mean, going back to Harry's point with kind of men and dealing with mental health issues, one of the things which I talked about in one of my articles was Freddie Flintoff's kind of documentary about eating disorders. And at the time, I can't remember if it was during a test match or something like that, he was playing a cricket match and he was actually throwing up halfway through the match because of the whole stigma around it being fat Flintoff. And he didn't even notice he had bulimia. He didn't think that was a thing. He almost saw it as something which was actually helping him be a better cricketer. So he's talking about how in this really skewed way, every time he threw up at half, you know, when he was in the changing rooms of a cricket match, he'd actually win the cricket game. And then, you know, he saw that as almost like, well, if I do this, I play better, so therefore I can keep on doing it. And I don't think it ever really crossed his mind that that was actually a mental health issue. And I think it's well something which I labelled it as that it's almost like a hidden injury in sport. They don't, if you was running around with like a really pulled muscle or something, you'd instantly know to kind of pull him back and say, look, this needs treatment. But with people, him not even knowing himself he had an issue with bulimia, he, you know, what is there to do? He doesn't know it's an injury. He doesn't know that it's actually hampering his kind of career, his sporting career.
I think that you to kind of bring the two threads together, that I think that, you know, men and women do deal with poor mental health differently, and that when they suffer it as a result of sport, it does manifest differently. And I mentioned kind of in a document that I will sent around to you that, you know, men sometimes feel perhaps more difficult to speak out, and women sometimes internalize that as eating disorders, but it's true that men also suffer from eating disorders and are perhaps even more likely to not realize that that is what it is, that to them they just see that they're getting big at the gym, restricting calories, and they're looking good, and they're also getting that positive reinforcement, like you say, Henry, that, you know, they walk outside, people tell them, wow, you're looking jacked, mate. And then it's like it's a vicious cycle. So I mean, people shouldn't comment about people's weight anyway, but especially Sabrina, you spoke about that you were in recovery, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think that people around you could help better in spotting those signs, and particularly within sport, and being able to kind of pull yourself out of that.
I would say personally, the people around me, it's so hard because you don't, it's not a blame game. You can't say, oh, this is your fault for not noticing it, and it was my fault for not telling you, and you can go back and forth for ages, and at the end of the day, it's not a blame game. It's just something that kind of, you know, as much as I hate to say it, does happen. And I think the thing that maybe people around me could have noticed is that in terms of maybe my family at the time, because this isn't something I spoke about with them until I maybe like started losing weight essentially. And when I started losing weight was how I like learned to eat, and that was kind of how I started my recovery process. And I think what would have helped me, I think personally, was people noticing that there wasn't the food that there was in the fridge, or there wasn't the food that there was in the cupboards. I think there was signs like that, and there were things like I used to hate eating in front of people. That was a massive thing for me. So I would like have this full day of being like sixth form or college, whatever you want to call it, and I would go the whole day just like not eating, but taking like a big water bottle and drinking loads to show people. And I was like, no, I'm not really hungry, I'm fine, and I'll just keep on putting it off. And you know, I think that's a massive sign, is things like that, because I could go a whole day, and I mean, I was at college from maybe 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. I just wouldn't eat, and then I'd go home, have like a massive meal, have lots of snacks, you know, binge, and then have dinner, and then have another binge. And I think that maybe baffled my friends, because I just tell them I wasn't hungry, but actually I think when you have an eating disorder, there's massive things that you just don't want to eat in front of people. You have an insecurity that people are watching you, they're saying things, and ultimately that's never the case. But I think maybe picking up on those signs and those little things of maybe not eating and drinking loads of water. And I would do stupid things, like if I did eat something in private at college, or like I did eat something in front of my friends, I would drink loads and then like, you know, want to throw it up, and I'd go to the toilet straight away. So it's maybe like, you know, having my friends talk to someone at the college for me, or like at the support system of the like institution I was at the time. But I don't want to put it like that in a respect that like I had to rely on those people to do those things for me, because it was like the way I did get into recovery was I had to admit that I wanted help. I think I just got to a point that I realized uni was a year away, and I was like, I can't go to uni with this like mental health kind of like, I don't know, the state I was in at the time was just like, I can't go to uni like this. Like I can't go to uni not knowing how to eat, especially if I'm going to be living on my own without my parents. Like, so I think things like that, possibly, I don't really have a long list of things, but I think there are signs that people can notice, and it's stuff that they possibly can't just pick up on straight away. So yeah.
So I keep on shamelessly putting my hand up. I know this is not a seminar, but I just well like to touch on it, because it was something which I struggled with back in actually first year, so I'm in second year now. But with the whole kind of eating thing, was that I think noticing if others do, it's one of those kind of horrible things where it takes one to know one, right? So you notice perhaps yourself in hindsight that, God, you know, what was I doing, eating less, and, you know, going to the gym more to burn off those calories of the food I didn't actually, or I shouldn't have eaten, or something like that. So, I mean, noticing that maybe friends maybe didn't want to finish a meal when they usually would, or maybe they don't really want that snack or things like that, or they don't really want to do this, or, you know, oh, I've had a big meal, God, I need to go burn it off or I'm going to become really fat. It's not how it works. And I think one of the most like eye-opening things I had was when I sat down with a specialist, and I had similar things of binge eating. Of course, I wouldn't eat enough, and then I know it's such a cliche, of course, I'm still a growing boy and everything. So I did need for food. And, you know, by me starving that, I only inevitably needed to eat the food at a later point. And the specialist said to me, it's like, what you're doing to your body right now is basically shoving your head underwater and waiting for about 35 seconds and then bringing it up. Of course, you're not going to breathe normally. You're going to be gasping for air. You're going to be taking in as much air as possible. That's what you're doing with food by not eating. You're kind of starving yourself. And then, of course, as soon as your body is like, look, we need food or there's going to be massive issues, I was chucking in all sorts of food. And then, of course, I feel bad about it and it becomes a spiral. So I don't know. In terms of spotting it, it's difficult unless you know exactly what to look for in terms of having that personal experience. But anyway, where you suddenly feel a bit uncomfortable about maybe some friend being like, oh, God, I'm so fat. And you know they're not. It's just by picking up things like that where, you know, maybe it's not quite right. And maybe they do need to kind of be nudged. And of course, as Sabrina says, it's in the end something which only you can do personally. You know, it takes that person to actually realize themselves they have an issue. But by perhaps nudging them in the right direction and kind of not challenging their thoughts, but in some way kind of, yeah, I guess challenging is the right word, and kind of making them realize that they have an irrational thought pattern, that would be a good way.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly bouncing off that as well. I really do agree with that. I think, you know, when someone does something and they think, and they are in that process of having an eating disorder, not realizing that they have one, I think something that I personally used to do was I'd say like, I do this thing, like this massive self-deprecation thing where I would make jokes about how I looked in order to like protect the fact that I actually thought that about myself. But, you know, it was almost like being a class clown, essentially. I'd be like, oh, you know, like I'm this size because, you know, I didn't get this size for luck, or, you know, something, a really, really stupid comment that I would say. And I would no longer ever use those kind of comments because I shouldn't have to use, I think, something that is a massive spotting sign, because I think people, especially with eating disorders, or even with any kind of mental health issue, will use self-deprecation in order to be able to like speak and to be heard. And that's like a massive sign that they think like it's almost like a cry for help, essentially. I used to do that loads, and I know that I've noticed a lot of other people around me who like have suffered similarly that I did to what I had, would do the same thing.
I think that maybe it's also partly an education thing, because I mean there's people that would develop it just in and of itself, the eating disorders, but then you can also accidentally develop an eating disorder by just not having that education when you're going into an elite environment. Because I mean, I've never suffered, but when I first started you know, really taking rugby seriously, as quite a slim person, I just wasn't educated on the fact that, right, you're going to have to consume so much more food in order to keep on the amount that you're burning off. So I remember in pre-season, sorry, like a couple of years ago, I dropped like 5 kilograms or something like that, something ridiculous. And I was talking to our S&C coach, and he was like, well, are you eating more? I was like, no, I'm just eating the same. Like, well, obviously you're losing weight because you're exercising so much. And anyone that plays rugby will know that in pre-season, you know, you're just running so much, so much gym work, and having that education within sports clubs, even ones that don't have, you know, I was lucky that I had that S&C coach to be like, and, you know, housemates that have also more experience in being athletes, to say, right, we need to start like figuring out how to make sure that not only are you eating more, but you're eating more of the right things. And some sports don't have that. So how within sports that even don't have a or high performance provision, can we educate people on this safely becoming better at sports?
I think, like for me personally, I've had kind of experiences in both, and since I played rugby union for my first year and a half, and then played rugby league since then. And so I've kind of, like, I've been in that same environment as you have, in that kind of pre-season atmosphere for rugby union, having all the S&C coaching and all that stuff, and you're kind of in that very like high performance environment. And like, I think even there, like personally, you don't really hear a lot about kind of the safety around it. It's a lot of, there is a lot of kind of pressure from coaches. I came back for pre-season at the start of my second year, and like I'm a pretty small person anyway, especially for rugby. And the coach's like, oh, you've lost, like he said to me at the end of the last season, I needed to bulk up. And I came back and he's like, you've lost weight. And I spent that whole summer in the gym and I'd put on weight. And I came back, the first thing he said to me is, oh, you've lost weight. And I was like, oh, come on, like I've spent the whole summer in the gym. And I think I do think it's a leadership thing. I think it's something that all clubs, regardless of whether you've got that high performance thing or not, can kind of be more aware of. I think when you are encouraging people to perform higher, and when you do kind of have, especially in contact sports where you are kind of encouraging people to be in the gym and stuff, it's just making sure they know that they're doing that safely. And I had like, is for rugby league this year, when we thought initially we might be playing in January, I had boys like message me over kind of Christmas and were like, you know, like, do you want me to, like, do you think I need to be like putting on weight and stuff? Do you think I need to be in the gym loads over Christmas? I was like, no, just don't, like, if you want to do it. And a boy was, he asked me, you know, how heavy do you think I need to be? I was like, it doesn't matter. Just if you want to bulk up. If you don't, like, do whatever you want to do. But I think it's an important thing for club leadership to be aware of, that when they are encouraging people to get fitter, to get stronger, to get bigger, that's fine. But just to make sure they are telling those members, especially guys who are new to uni and freshers and stuff, that they need to be doing that safely and that there's no kind of obligation to do it.
I think it's one of the things which actually the university did do really well was the Exeter gym itself, the one on campus. As you go in, as I'm sure you probably all seen, they have, I mean, countless posters, stickers, kind of flashcards, everything on eating disorders and how to spot it. And admittedly, it's good to raise awareness, but you know, sometimes you can't actually be blind to that. But just by having that there, kind of almost plants a seed in your head that, you know, thinking maybe that's what I do. You know, maybe I am actually going to the gym to burn off, I don't know, a pack of Tang Fastics I ate or something like that. And just by planting that seed, I mean, it was almost like aggressive advertising in a really good way, of course. But as you came in, you couldn't avoid it. There were literally posters everywhere saying, you know, I can't remember what the 4 tips were, but it's really simple things to look out for. And of course, it's almost like taking a horse to the water and forcing it to drink. Obviously, it just won't. But just by planting that seed, I mean, it's a very low cost, as you talk about, at least with kind of money and funding. Putting up a few posters can't really cost that much. And just by having that in the gym, the very environment where you work out, perhaps maybe like the cafeteria for a sports team or something like that, just by putting it there, it just raises awareness, even in the slightest way.
Sabrina, I was just going to ask on that then, from an AU perspective, how engaged you are with clubs talking about this, and do you think that's enough, and what more could potentially be done or linked between the clubs and the AU itself to cover this further?
I think the difficulty, and this is something obviously, you know, the pandemic has been so crappy in terms of like dealing with engaging with this kind of thing, because I think something that we've tried to do for like, so from my perspective, obviously, I try to be in touch with the welfare officers as much as I can. And I think 3 or 4 times in the past academic year, we've had to have training for the welfare officers to, like, you know, sit in on Zoom calls for about 3-4 hours at a time, talking about you know, sexual violence and eating disorders and depression, anxiety, you know, how to spot it, how to refer it. And I've been there, my welfare consultant Anna, she's been there, and it's hard training. And I think what doesn't make it easy is obviously the pandemic, because of the pandemic we've had to do like everything online. Obviously it's like cameras off, everyone's muted, so you don't know if anyone's listening, you don't know if these people are engaging, and you don't want to force them to be like, oh, you've got to turn your cameras on, because we, you know, it's a really sensitive subjects. And I think, you know, when I signed up for this role, I assumed that like, naively possibly, that a lot of it, well, some of it was going to be in person. And what I wanted to do, one of the steps I wanted to make was like how they did with I think Movember in 2019, they did like support groups. I think Cam did like a support group session with like Movember, where he got, like, if I'm right, I could be wrong, but I remember reading about it, and he got different men from different sports clubs to talk about like mental health and, you know, their own experiences and how they spotted it in their friends. And I think that was something that massively inspired me to do this role, was I wanted to do the same with like eating disorders and sexual violence, and not only create these like support groups to get people the help they need, but to like celebrate how far, like, you know, sport has taken them in that, like in that recovery process, or like, you know, in that achievement of coming so far with their, like, you know, depression, anxiety, eating disorders. And I, you know, it's been so hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, you know, the training has been difficult because it's not easy to talk about anyway, and it's something that even if we did get to do in person, it'd still have the same level of difficulty, if not, you know, even more difficult. But I think it's the engagement that we've struggled with, in all honesty. Like, you know, we have people who sometimes don't show up, or I've had, you know, people message me, like welfare officers, who say, you know, it's a bit much for me, do you mind if I sit out and I can talk to you about it after? And I'm like, exactly, like, you know, of course you can, it's absolutely okay to do that. And it's hard because you don't feel like you have that intimate support, which maybe in the past couple of years has been available, if that made any kind of sense.
Yeah, well, I just say on that as well, is those Good Lad Initiative tools, which are the things Cam did, were like, I've been in those twice now by the time at uni, and they are so helpful. They're really, really, really great. And I kind of did them once as a first year, where we kind of did it with all rugby union guys, and it was just so nice to do it with guys who are, you know, third years and were quite big personalities and wouldn't really have spoken to you that much before. And actually, like, everyone really bought into it, and you kind of saw a different side to people, and it was a really like nice. And there were people that I kind of did that workshop with, that then you'd kind of see around campus, and there was a kind of a connection with them that you didn't have before. And then I did it in my second year with guys from a bunch of other sports clubs, and you just see you've got so many like common experiences. And so yeah, like, those things were like really great. And I think that's, like Sabrina says, it's a shame that you can't do things like that with the pandemic. There is just an engagement. There's something about just being in a room with people and engaging with people that is so helpful.
Yeah, I think I massively agree with that. You know, we've had the Good Lad workshops online for a couple of months now, and I think the difficulty is like you know, the online engagement is pushing people to come to these, because you don't want to put them in a position where they have to come to these. Obviously it's optional, but I think for a session to be so like deep and really not difficult, but I think there is a sense of like, you know, it's going to be something that when you walk in, you're not going to maybe walk out with the same frame of mind. It's going to be, it's difficult at times. And I think when you're in person and you can be there for someone, you haven't got internet connections and background noise and all these other things, and you don't have the option to mute, there's so much more intimacy that is there in person. I think, like, obviously that's not something that we can help, but I know that those sessions have helped a lot of boys. And I think it's just making that like a whole student body thing is what I think the uni, and like what I've spoken to like my welfare committee and welfare officers, and I know it's something that when we finally can, it's something we want to start up again for a lot of other support groups.
And Sabrina, you touched on as well how these kind of educational things are optional. I think an interesting thing to bear in mind is actually that GPs currently in the NHS, it is optional for them to be trained in mental health. They are not, it's not part of the curriculum for them to learn about mental health issues. It's for them to learn themselves. So I think it's really important that actually, as kind of welfare officers, is that you're doing that as well. You're almost actually doing, you know, a better kind of, or offering a better kind of structure and system to actually actively offering that education to these, when even the NHS currently doesn't. So I think it's, yeah, just really good.
And I think that it's a really important conversation to talk about. Are there enough preventative measures in place, as well as, because we can talk a lot about also how like there's stuff to help you once you experience these issues, and how difficult or not difficult it is to reach out through the university system. We can talk about in a bit. But other than the Good Lad Initiative, like, what is the university doing to prevent people from getting in those positions in the first place?
I did a questionnaire, actually. I put it on Overheard in Exeter, that Facebook group, because I was curious myself, as someone who'd gone through the Exeter wellbeing system and been slightly disappointed at the kind of waiting times, the lack of responses, to kind of waiting around when I was clearly struggling and I'd have to wait. So I put something out, a small kind of question, literally a Google question, which made about 2 minutes, just asking rather simple questions, saying, have you experienced pressure, feelings of depressed, low moods, anxious thoughts in the past few weeks? How many times have you experienced it? Do you feel like you benefit from therapy? Do you feel the university has done enough? Now, I was expecting, let's say, 50 responses. We got 350 responses, which I was really pleased about, but it uncovered quite a lot of issues which still not solved, and I can run through now. So the Exeter Wellbeing Department has, I think, as of now, only one eating difficulties support specialist. with only one slot available out of literally any time until the end of the term. They only have one slot available, and that's, I'm pretty sure, because they only work 1 day a week. The CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, they still have only one specialist a week who comes in and only works on Thursday. And this is for a top Russell Group university with, 20,000 students? And they have one person for eating disorder specialists and one person for CBT, which are the main things which tackle mental health issues but not even for students, sorry, for anyone. And if you go into the kind of statistics of my questionnaire, you'll have, I'll read some off. So 50% struggle with mental health issues every day of the week, which according to the PHQ-9 scale, which is something which therapists and psychiatrists will use to kind of gauge how bad basically your mental health issues are. That would be on the severe part. So that's every day, and that'd score incredibly highly, and basically put you as either severely depressed or severely anxious. 85% of students have struggled with mental health during lockdown. Over 60% believe they benefit from therapy. 70% feel the university has not done enough. And all these things just build up, and it's relatively alarming. And I'm not sure whether you can put this instance as this Exeposé and Exeter kind of guild thing, but it's quite alarming that nothing's been done. And if you look at the responses for which a uni has done, I'm not sure, I may be wrong here, but it's not much, sadly. If you look at the emails to mass kind of corporate emails, which is a lot of the complaints which happened in my questionnaire, because I left a little box at the end saying, suggest your thoughts. And of course, half of them were like, no detriment policy, but the other half were actually quite constructive. They're complaining about the corporate emails. I think one recently, which is genuinely laughable, is they said, get outside more. It really helps your mental health during lockdown. You can't go outside. We've made a playlist of nature sounds to solve your mental health. And that's it. That was it. And if you go into any other corporate email, I'm pretty sure 90% of them, the well-being's at the bottom. With, let's say 2 lines saying, we care about your mental health. Here's the well-being page. Nothing else. So I don't know what everyone else's thoughts are, but I think for me, it's something which I'm very passionate about and frustrated by that the university is being so slow to change what is clearly a system under such strain. And even before the pandemic, before lockdown, and yet here we are with nothing to say for, nothing to change.
I completely agree. I even speaking, essentially being a pro bono for the athletic union, it doesn't make me biased towards the uni. It doesn't make me feel like, oh, we're doing the best we can, because no, we're not. I completely agree with you. I literally went through the wellbeing service back in January, and I thought it was the most shambles process I've ever been through in my life. Honestly, I feel like they just lead you on and drop you, essentially. I wish I could say otherwise, but they, you self-refer, or however, you do. I don't really remember. I think I self-referred through like the iExeter app, and then they phoned me up. They were like, we've got an appointment tomorrow. Brilliant. Booked an appointment. That was quick. That was great. I was thinking, okay, this is actually going to get somewhere. And they give you a one-off, I think it's like a 40-minute phone session with some kind of like therapist, counsellor. I don't fully know the title, but I know it's something along those lines. And then they do, at the end of this 40 minutes, they suggest what you should do. And it's the most shambles list of suggestions, because I think they assume the privilege at the uni means you can afford like help outside. So I think like this lady was on the phone to me, was telling me, like, it was almost like I told her everything that was going on in my life and why I was so stressed, and then she just finished like by saying, okay, well, we can't give you like a counselling therapy thing, like, we can't give you a weekly counselling session or something like that, but if you wanted to like go private. And I was like, and it annoys me, because I'm like, not every student, even if we are a top Russell Group university and a very wealthy university, it doesn't mean that everyone at the university has that same financial status. And they assume that I could go private. And I think I remember like, she was suggesting all these things. I was like, I just remember saying, how much does that cost? And then she'd suggest the price. I was like, oh my God, we're putting a price on mental health. Like it was ridiculous. And even hearing like those statistics of how many people work in different sections of well-being, it's sad. It's very sad.
I think it's one of those, I'm not sure if it's true, it is the tab after all, but there was a tab article saying that Exeter was the only Russell Group university to actually cut funding to the wellbeing department. Now this was responded to by the Vice Chancellor saying, of course, it was a lie, and saying that actually they'd more than doubled their funding. No specific figure, no specific investment figure, just more than doubled. And you actually can't now find who works for the wellbeing department. Is not available as information you can find. So you can't find out whether they've hired more. When I was on the phone discussing with a wellbeing person about the changes I personally and the other 350 odd students who replied, or they had suggested, and of course it was all taken in, and this is not an attack on the kind of people who work at the wellbeing system, because they are under incredible stress, but they're just not given anything to, they can't, they've only been given so much money, so much, things to offer. And another really bad thing is that they mainly rely on the NHS service TalkWorks. Now, this is a national kind of service, and yet we're relying on, as a top Russell Group university, this is a phrase which I think we've thrown about so much, but it's embarrassing, I have to say.
In my kind of time at Movember, we've had the support from the kind of the unions and stuff and the people higher up. It's really restrictive. We have to operate within those means, and like we have to kind of jump through hoops, and there's so much stuff we can't do just because of red tape that actually, like, in reality is not like kind of dangerous or everything, but it's so difficult to do stuff. We couldn't put posters up in my second year, so in 2019 we put a bunch of posters up, they all got taken down the next day. So it's posters for Movember, and they and we put a lot of them up in places that were probably not easy to take down. All of them got taken down the next day, and I'm like, how are you out here like taking down posters for that, and trying to organize events and trying to organize stuff this year through COVID was a nightmare. And I understand all those reasons why, but there was no effort to work with us. It was we'd come through with the idea and it'd be like, no, you can't do that. Not like a constructive thing of, oh, well, let's figure out ways to do it. It was, no, you can't do that. And like Ben was incredible, like helping us out. It was genuinely like having him as part of the team. And we had him as on-side as anyone could possibly be. Probably like he did just as much work as all the rest of us. And it was still really difficult. And so in my experience, it's all the kind of communication suggesting that the university cares about it feels performative to me.
Linking that back, sorry, Josh, just going to quickly jump in. Linking that back to the topic of sport then as well, it'd be useful to have that. It's all really good, but it'd be useful to have that pathway, if you like, from being able to share your concerns, well-being concerns that you might have about somebody within your sports society or you personally, to go to your sports welfare officer, and having that pathway through to those mental health services at the university, which obviously, as Henry's touched on, the people running them need more support to be able to run them more effectively. But it comes down to that Passover, if you like. That's a rubbish way of describing it, but you get what I mean. You need to have that very clear pathway of who to approach if you've got concerns about your friends, your teammates, or you yourself, not just from sports societies in the AU, but from the guild as well. And there really needs to be that much stronger structure. I think it is worth us pointing out that the majority of the individuals within the welfare department are genuinely brilliant people, caring, compassionate, do their job as brilliantly as they can, but they are really up against it because they're up against a brick wall and red tape and having to jump through loopholes. And that's the big issue for them, is they need the support to support the students.
So for Sabrina, to kind of build off of what everyone said, we spoke a little bit earlier, or someone did, is there a way in which, or a pathway that students can go through sport, through their clubs, into the wellbeing service?
So yeah, going off both of your points, both yours and I think Harry mentioned it earlier, it actually is a way, but we do have to understand so I have like regular AU council meetings, and something that we get told is a lot of statistics, and we get, every month I've had one of these bloody things, I get told online engagement is getting lower, and we get told that there aren't as many people applying for postgrads, and another thing that we get told is about how welfare officers are struggling. And that's the problem, is a pandemic is hard enough when you have welfare officers who are your lifeline, essentially, because if clubs need, especially freshers at the moment, I'm not like singling them out, but obviously, newbies, people who haven't had that uni experience and don't know people, when they're reaching out to welfare officers and welfare officers struggling, that cuts off kind of my line of communication. So how the referral process, I guess you could say, goes is we have like a confidentiality agreement. So we have that in line with like things like Nightline. It's very similar to their agreement.
I was
And
going to say, like you said, it's about being proactive rather than reactive, and it's the same in all walks of life. I think one thing that all of us can agree on, though, is in terms of being proactive, the student body at the uni is fantastic, and looking at a slightly different track on it. And Josh, this is where you come into it a bit more as well with the Movember stuff. So it was really difficult this year having to do it online and different events and things, but I'm sure the numbers rocketed up again since. But like at the end of November, the uni had raised £150,000 combined just for you with being involved in it. But how proud are you to see the student body engaging that much in raising funds for mental health and for awareness as well?
Yeah, man, it was crazy. It was crazy. Like, yeah, so it was like literally just over like £200,003 or something. Like, it was like with about 5 minutes to spare, we got over 200,000, and we were gassed of like 199, and we were like, if we end on 199, that would actually be a little bit disappointing. I'd rather be on like 180 or something. I would have been gutted. But yeah, it was incredible, like unbelievable, and I think that kind of showed it, especially as like Movember Exeter has always been that kind of. It's always been a big thing compared to other unis for some reason. We just had great people running it at the start, and it's kind of getting bigger at all unis, but obviously we're still it's still a bigger thing here. But seeing firstly it be bigger in the pandemic showed like the people were genuinely like conscious of that stuff, and it's not just like, oh, there's this event going on, so I'll go do that. It showed that people genuinely like do care. And also it was the fact that so many people this year I felt we're speaking about the fact that it's a month, we say it's a month-long campaign, but it's a year-long movement. Like it's not just a November thing. Like it's the November is to raise awareness to carry through to the rest of the year. And people were unbelievable. Like, and especially seeing the kind of the female sports clubs and female fundraisers get on board this year on a scale that we didn't have even like a quarter of that last year. And like lady sports clubs, which like some of the totals, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it was crazy. And yeah, so like you say, the student body is on it, and I think raising awareness is great, and the work that went in, that everyone did fundraising for, that was great. But I do think there's still work to be done. I don't think it was, oh well, great, it's kind of the student body's all perfect. I think the awareness is there, but I think it can feel a little bit like, well, you know, the awareness is there, but how are people still helping their friends and stuff? And I think people can still always be more proactive in knowing what to say. And given now, you think people, you know, you'd have to live under a rock at Exeter to not know that was going on in that month. But now people know that those kind of issues are being talked about. It's people now being proactive, like you say, and going out to their friends and making sure everyone's okay. And like, you know, same techniques they use to check on men, check on the girls in their life as well. It's a year-long thing, but it's a month-long campaign, and I think people are starting to get that. I do think it's really, that was so encouraging to see, for sure.
And it's for sure kind of, we've touched on some like of the negative aspects, but that's the kind of positive power of sport as well, because I'm not sure if you have the exact figures for like how much of that contribution came from sports clubs, but it was massive, and I know all the sports clubs were really getting in on it. And I think that as much as we talk about that there are pressures within the sport that result in these negative feelings and everything, but that when it turns around the other way and that people have to come together as a community, that sport can be really useful in raising awareness, raising funds, getting everyone involved. So I think that we should also quickly like touch on, I know we're getting on a little bit now, but what are the like positive benefits of being part of a sport, this opposite direction of kind of bringing you out of a slump, and if you guys have any personal experiences with how sport has helped you out of difficult situations.
I think one of the massive things I'd say is like a personal experience is I came to the uni not knowing anything about sport. I didn't know a single thing. I hadn't ever done any sport, and I was still like in this process of like losing weight and recovering from an eating disorder. I didn't know what the hell sport was and how to do it. I mean, you know, you say you've done rugby. I jumped from like rugby to badminton to tennis, and like did all these different sports, didn't know what I was doing. And I think it felt like as weird as it may be to say, it felt like this massive connection when I started boxing. I think I went along to this like female only session, which can I say is just the best thing to offer women in like mixed sports clubs, because it can feel so daunting, especially in things like boxing. And I went along to this and I was not expecting a single thing out of it. And I went along to it, I said, this is what I want to do. I absolutely love this. And you know, through doing that, I'm not only like writing my dissertation on women's boxing, but it's something that it's a passion that I hold very, very close to my heart now. And I think breaking stigmas about women in sport is so important to me, and breaking like stigmas about speaking about mental health in sport, I think is just like so important to me. I think there are so many things that sport can offer to do with mental health. I'm losing my words here. I can't even begin to like list things, but I'd say as on a personal level, it just is this massive like student body community. And I think just touching, I know we've stopped talking about Movember, but I think one thing that really inspired me about Movember was, you know, we've been thrown into this pandemic, especially at uni, and we were thrown into a mini lockdown in November, and people took it as an opportunity to do sport and to contribute to mental health. And I couldn't be proud to be part of a student body that could, you know, take something as big as a pandemic and turn it into something as useful as productiveness. So yeah.
I think building on that, you know, my experience, like sport can be such a like release. It can be such a like, it's the ultimate kind of like break from it all. Like I kind of, you know, like in my kind of personal experience, you know, this summer I lost one of my best friends to suicide, and I was in a really like bad place myself, just generally, and I kind of was very depressed and I was kind of, you know, in a pretty bad place myself. Before I came back to uni, was thinking about not coming back this year and just taking a year of interrupted study and kind of just taking a year to fix myself, because I was just in all sorts of, but I couldn't really leave the house, couldn't really socialize or do anything for kind of a few months really. And I came back to uni, and I was kind of meant to be captain of the rugby team, and I was like, I've got to kind of run training sessions. And I remember before the first training session of the year, I called my girlfriend and I was like, I can't go, like I can't go, like I don't want to do this, I can't go and now like, you know, be really like kind of bouncy to all the freshmen, be like, hi, like, how you doing, you know, like, and chat to everyone and kind of lead that. I was like, I didn't feel like I had that in me at all. And you know, she was like, you know, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go. But I felt like I had to, and so I went. And I really struggled with the kind of speaking to people, kind of, you know, before the session started. But I found like as soon as you start like playing, I was just a completely different person. And I'm a very like vocal player anyway. And I was like, before the session, I was like, there's no way I'm still going to be like that. And I just completely snapped into it. And I didn't even like think about it. And by the end of the session, I was like, that's the most I've spoken in like months, literally months. I'd basically not socialized with anyone for so long. And I realized that when I was playing sport, I was literally a completely different person. And it's not like then after the session, I was magically cured and was like, oh, it's all better and everything. Like, but it's that ultimate release. And you just know and then I'd look forward to training sessions, because I'd know that for an hour or two, I would just feel like kind of myself again. And it's such, like really amazing thing.
Yeah, I think for me, sorry, Henry, quickly, I think the phrase I use is sport is the perfect pick me up. Like, and for me, I'll be honest, I'm one of those people whose life revolves around sport. Either I'm playing it, I'm writing about it, chatting about it, commentating on it, whatever. But it really is. And like when I was going through my bits and pieces as well, like the one thing was Friday training, which, ignoring the fact it's an absolutely hanging training time, 7 till 9 on a Friday evening, was one of those things where it was great, because I knew that I had that to look forward to. And even still now, having gone through those bits and pieces and out the other side, it makes me appreciate just how important that opportunity is with sport, because it's a release as well. At the end of the day, it's a chance to have a laugh, have a chat with your mates, play competitively, play socially. But also, if you've got any pent-up frustrations, difficulties, you can just leave them for 80 minutes if you're playing rugby, 60 minutes korfball, whatever sport you're playing. I was going to say 3 sets for tennis, but I'll probably be beaten up 6-love. But it's one of those things where for that period of time that you're playing sport, you don't have to think about anything else. And for me, that's what's so good about it, and that's what's so important about it. And like Josh said, it sort of brings out parts of you that you want to get back, or that you enjoy, and sort of being vocal, being animated, and it gives you that opportunity to just engage and be happy and be active as well. And that is so important. The phrase, and I'm rambling a bit, but the phrase that's going around at the moment online, and is very true, is physical health equals mental health. And it's exactly the same thing. They are two sides of the same coin.
I was going to touch on the kind of social aspects, because I mean, I think it's the same issue. One of my friend's fathers used to be a semi-professional footballer. Is that you have a group of people in the football, you now have a group of friends. Even if you can't really kick a football properly, it's also part of that team. You're part of that kind of, just going for a little kickabout. You have a group of people to talk about football with, and all that. And I remember when was I fresher last year, we joined the 6-a-side football league. This was on a really dark, useless weather, kind of tipping it down with rain. We all go up there and we start kicking the ball about, and I suddenly feel like $1 million. We're all playing football together. I hardly know these people, but suddenly I have a group of friends, and that is on a really simple level, something really important for freshers, where, the idea is to, of course, know as many people as possible, to actually make as many friends as possible as well. And just having that, as you say as well, Harry, with the weekly sessions for training, of course, 6-a-side didn't quite sadly bring back training, but we did have that every Friday night was our big game, the 6-a-side. It started turning into a social thing. Not only was the football team turning up, we'd have people from our block turning up, random kind of other friends turning up. We'd have a little crowd going. It's great. It's a genuine, just nice experience to have. And even on the more simple levels of just going to the gym, you can go to the gym with a friend. You have a friend now. You go on a run with a friend. You now, a better friend. It's anything. It's almost like a kind of social solvent in a way that doing sport can bring you closer with you. And I think it's such an important thing, especially now with, how difficult it is to make connections with other people during lockdown. I think it's really important that once things do lift, is that these sports return.
Yeah, well, I could only, sorry, Henry, I'm going to go quickly. I could only echo everything everyone said. I mean, as far as personal experience, obviously I'm part of the rugby club, but, I was always a very, very sporty kid, and through secondary school and everything. And then when I went into sixth form, I literally gave up everything. And I think it was for various reasons, but one of the big driving factors was that, I wanted to get my A levels, and I wanted to do really, really well so that I could get out of my school. So I just dropped all of my sport, because I was like, every waking moment I have to be studying in order to be able to get out of here. And when I went to university, the one thing that my dad said was, you have to, whatever it is, you have to, get that structure back into your life, and you have to join sport, and you have to go back to it. And it's one of those things where even if you've been out for 2 years, never done it before, you always find a place for yourself. And even if you have to go through several sports, I was lucky that I came back in, I was like, well, I want to do rugby, and I went there and I found my best friends, and it's, in a cheesy way, made me who I am, and it's been really, really formative for me. But some people, it's not like that. You join and you go, I don't think this is for me, these people aren't really for me, and just keep going to taste the sessions, keep switching. Even like me, if in my first year I joined rugby and I stuck with it and everything, but coming into this third year, if a coronavirus hadn't happened, I was thinking, right, I'm going to find another sport to join, because I want to keep going and I want to meet new people, and you keep finding people that you have that similarity. As soon as you go to do any sport, like you've all said, you meet people and you have one thing in common at least, and that is that you enjoy what you're doing and you're all there together, and that's been so beneficial for me, and I think it's so beneficial for so many people. And I can only echo what you've all said, like, I have a really, really crap day, and be in a really bad mood and go to training, and it's just impossible to stay in that bad mood. I couldn't like slump around anyone, because I'm like, what are you doing? Come on, let's go. So I would just say, to finish, that to any one that's listening, even if you're going in and you're doing a MA, PhD, whatever, join a sports society or a society, find your people, and that's always so beneficial.
Then So if it's okay with everybody, then we'll leave it there. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of different aspects and a lot of different angles. Thank you ever so much to Sabrina, to Henry and to Josh for joining us and providing some really interesting insight from some different perspectives as well, which is brilliant to have those different dynamics and different perspectives on things coming through. And as always, thank you to Elise as well. Make sure to follow all of the Exposé medias and bits and pieces to watch this video, and obviously keep looking soon for more content, and any writers or anybody watching this that wants to stand in the Exposé elections at the end of April, drop myself, Elise, Nick or Joel a line. So thank you very much for everybody for watching and for joining us, and we'll see you next time.